Welcome to the ASCO University Weekly Podcast. My name is Dr. Alexander Drillon, and I'm the Clinical Director of the Early Drug Development Service at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. Each week, members of our expert faculty will present a new episode based on either a self-assessment question, a new drug in oncology, or an ASCO guideline. Self-assessment question episodes review a high-quality question from an existing ASCO University e-learning course, with topics taken from areas identified on the ABIM exam blueprint. Our new drug episodes outline a newly approved drug in oncology, including the rationale behind the drug's use, the approval date, and relevant clinical trial data that supported the drug's approval. ASCO Guidelines episodes give information on a recently released ASCO guideline, including the purpose, method, results, and recommendations for each guideline. Learners may subscribe to the podcast in order to receive automatic updates when new content is released. For more information, visit our comprehensive e-learning center at university.asco.org.
So, I don't know about you guys, but I was 30,000 feet above the ground, wearing a nasal cannula attached to an oxygen tank, probably somewhere over Iowa, when I had my first thought of becoming an oncologist. At that moment, I was replaying the events that had unfolded at a cancer center conference room in Seattle just 3 days prior. But 2 years prior to that, I was an 18-year-old college freshman struggling with a progressive fatigue and a gradually protruding abdomen. By the following summer, the fatigue was making it difficult to get off the couch, and I was getting comments that I looked like I was pregnant. I finally presented stubbornly to my primary doctor, and a workup unfolded. I was anemic, my spleen was massively enlarged, a bone marrow biopsy was performed. I still remember the nurse practitioner literally getting up on the table, putting all of her weight into that bone marrow needle, commenting on my young, healthy bones. A diagnosis was made: LGL T-cell leukemia. In 1985, an eager young hematology fellow was hustling through the hallways of the same institution I would come to 12 years later fighting for my life. He was gathering a series of cases and describing, for the first time, a clonal disorder of large granular lymphocytes. Tom Loughran's observations would set him on a career dedicated to understanding this disease and helping those afflicted with it. That day in the conference room was one of the only sunny days on an otherwise rainy Seattle April in 1997. I can still feel the sunlight coming through that conference room window as the doctor dove into the litany of tests that had been performed in the preceding week and all the reasons why my leukemia was not responding. She paused. There is a 95% chance you would die from the transplant itself. A silence hung in the room. My bone marrow transplant was supposed to be a week away. I gathered my strength and I asked her, "In your medical opinion, how long do I have to live?" "Months." And as her eyes fell to the table, she added, "Maybe weeks." 3 days later, I was on that plane flying home. The events of that conference room were swirling in my head as a strange thought emerged. Perhaps if some miracle happened, I would dedicate myself to pursuing medicine, to becoming an oncologist, to being in that room with that patient, looking him in the eyes, maybe even putting a hand on his shoulder. When I arrived home, I went to meet with my hometown oncologist. As I sat down with him, he looked me in the eyes and he said, "You don't look as sick as they said you were." We both laughed. It was a little lift, not false hope, but just a little lift. And then came another one. He had spoken with Dr. Loughran, who had informed him of a few patients with aggressive presentations similar to mine who were responding very well to low-dose methotrexate. After months of debilitating side effects from chemotherapy, the idea of a once-a-week pill with potentially minimal side effects seemed like a no-brainer. I started the medication, and within 3 months, I was in a hematologic remission and off of oxygen. I finished college as the seed of a thought started on a plane, began to germinate. 11 years later, my hero, Dr. Loughran, became a mentor and offered me the opportunity to write a book chapter on LGL leukemia. As I combed through the literature, I came upon an article written by Dr. Loughran and his colleagues entitled "The Clinico-Pathologic Features of Aggressive Large Granular Lymphocyte Leukemia." It was full of mouse models and basic science, but at the heart of it were 4 patients. As I looked through those patients, I saw patient number 2, a 19-year-old man with a diffusion capacity barely compatible with life. And then it struck me. Patient number 2 was me. It was a sobering flashback to just how sick I was, made even more powerful by the medical knowledge I had acquired in that time. But it was followed immediately by a flood of gratitude for all that I'd been given. I wanted to call out right there, patient number 2 is alive and breathing, filled with hope, a little bit of fear, a lot of love. The p-value of countless clinical trials is made up of patients. Every number, every N, filled with those same hopes, fears, and love. I started this talk by telling you the improbable location of where I was when I had my first thought of becoming an oncology provider. And I challenge you to do the same. Caring for cancer patients can be an exhausting task. I think we've probably all felt that. But in those moments, I implore you, think of patient number 2. Tom Loughran is my hero. Our stories are forever intertwined. And I believe that as long as every patient number 2 has a Tom Loughran, there is always hope. Thank you.